All right, we are here. We've made it. We've made it at least to the recording, if not the airing of this episode. It is the end of 2024. And as is becoming a little bit of a tradition, we're back with our end of year mailbag. My name is Dave Prodan, and taking over hosting duties for this episode is producer extraordinaire Miguel Clemente. Miguel, I guess walk us through how today's episode's going to go and why we're doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And hi, everybody. I'm happy to be back here on the microphone. So this is our end of the year mega mailbag where we took a lot of questions from our listeners at the Lineup Pod on Instagram. So thank you to everyone for writing in and for all the conversations as well that we've had throughout these years. So we're going to get to those in essentially 3 year in review segments where we'll be sharing some of our thoughts about the year and the year ahead and cap each of those segments with a bunch of listener questions for Dave. So in this first segment, we'll start by talking about a personal highlight moment from the 2024 season. So if you're feeling ready, I can start, Dave.
Yeah, go for it. What was your highlight moment?
Sick. So in 2024, I'm going to have to say John John winning his third title.
World number one, nice easy rolling. Lays down a nice clean wrapping cutback on the wind up. Big fin throw reverse. He's got a very comfortable pace and a happy energy to his surfing right now. Driving through another wrapping cutback. Throwing the fins out, creating more space. Lays into it again. What a show from Florence. John John Florence, your 2024 world champion.
Oh my God, I'm like tearing up. This, I don't even know, like so much, this was hard. And yeah, it was just a tough year and just really fun and challenging, and this event is like, you know, winning the world title at this event, there's so much pressure, and but I couldn't have done it without my family. Just like, I love you guys and my whole team, everyone there, my wife, my new son. I can't believe it.
The celebrations already starting downstairs. John Florence, now a 3-time world champion, getting cheered up.
Oh, a controversial highlight.
Oh yeah, I know, right? The reason why is because when I saw Italo on a rampage, he was crushing dreams. He's taking no prisoners. I thought for sure if he makes it to John, Italo's momentum is going to be so on fire that he's just going to be unstoppable. And this year, in the events that John was a favorite, he took second at Pipe, at Margaret's, at Tahiti. So I just kind of questioned, okay, we know he wants it. We know he wants to prove himself at Trestles, but is he going to be able to make it out? So I was able to watch from home. I was able to kind of just watch as a fan, sit on the couch and just kind of see the excitement of the day go through. And I was just so happy for John to have his moment. It was well-deserved. And I was really stoked for it.
It's a good one. Yeah, I got a little bit more on that later, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge deal for John and like cemented his, 3-title dynasty in a pretty profound way. But yeah, I think there's a lot of huge moments that stood out for me in 2024. I'll go with our other world champ, Caity Simmers, but I'll go back to the start of the year and we're at Pipe. We had like a really good forecast. The women got like an incredible day. Molly Picklum, like out at Pipeline, Betty Lusakura Johnson out at Backdoor. They just were like really like tectonic shift in women's performance at that venue. But yeah, Caity winning the event, like iconic comment on the broadcast, Pipeline is for the fucking girls.
Here goes Caity Simmers pulling in, huge backdoor section, and she reappears.
And right when you see Molly start with a 927, Caitlin does have an answer back.
Opportunity setting up for Caity Simmers.
Drills it. How about that hack?
Molly Picklum, she needs a score of a 339.
Caity's just got to just hold it for a couple minutes.
Molly up and riding, grabbing rail in the barrel. Can she thread it out? No!
Caity Simmers is your champion of the Lexus Pipe Pro presented by Yeti.
Yeah, girl! Caity, congratulations.
Pipeline for the girls. That's all I have to say. This rate's terrifying. I respect everyone who wants a part of it, and I respect everyone who doesn't want a part of it.
like, I just think everything about her is like the opposite of being scripted. It's very, very, this is like even like a dirty scripted word, but like genuinely authentic to her. And she just is like feeling it. She surfs the way she wants to surf. She talks the way she wants to talk. She expresses herself like in a truly like impressive fashion. So yeah, I thought that was like an awesome thing to start the year. And then it was an amazing bookend. She's so young. She won her first world title at Trestles alongside John. And yeah, in a few weeks we'll be back at Pipe, and we'll see how this next generation goes. With Caity now kind of is the target as opposed to the hunter, So yeah. I'm excited. Well, I guess we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that was probably the big moment that started the year for me.
That's awesome. She totally set the tone for the year, I feel like, especially for the elevation of like the women's surfing this whole year. And yeah, that's a good pick. Sick. So we'll go into some fan questions. We got quite a few, some a bit touchy as well, but do our best to answer them. So first question is from @NorbellR. Best heat of the year, Dave?
I feel like it's not too dissimilar to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It is tough, and I will bypass the John and Caity moments at the WSL finals at Lowers, but again, like those are pretty special, and I think like seeing them both ascend with all that pressure and really perform, it was very, very cool. But yeah, my favorite event this year on a personal level was probably Tahiti. The waves were pumping, and yeah, I'd have like two favorite heats from that event. I think the first one was Vahine Fierro, the Tahitian wildcard against Tatiana Weston Webb. I think it was the semifinals, and yeah, they were just exchanging huge barrels. I think Tati got a 10. Like Vahine won the heat, ended up winning the event, and she's now going to be on tour, which is awesome because sometimes you get surfers that are like really, really good in the tube, or they're really, really good in kind of all the other conditions, and she's just great in everything. So it's awesome to see her perform at the CT level as a wild card, do it on the Challenger Series in different conditions, and now she's going to be on tour, a tour that's starting at Pipe. So hopefully that gives her an advantage for her campaign to make the cut. And then my second heat that was a favorite from that event was actually Ramsey taking down Kelly in their quarterfinals heat. It's awesome to see Kelly like with his fangs out. It always is. I suppose I've seen a lot, but it's more of a rarity these days. And I think getting like intense waves, really, he gets up for those things. And he and Ramsey have a history around like wild cards and replacement spots. It's all very respectful, but like there is a history. And so, yeah, I just think both those heats, Vahine and Tatiana and Ramsey and Kelly, there was like a lot of pathos in those matches and just like awesome performances and pumping waves. So yeah, that'd be my best heats of the year for me personally.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was a riveting moment for sure. So you spoke of a challenger qualifying as well for the championship tour. So the next question kind of leads into that. At Santo.Ricardo, why so few challenger events?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So yeah, the other day, the WSL, we released some of the calendars for 2025. I think the Challenger Series and the Longboard Tour specifically. The Challenger Series the Challenger Series next year, it has Newcastle, Bolido, Huntington Beach, Ericeira, and Saquarema. All decent venues, and we're definitely appreciative of those communities as well as our partners in supporting what I think is like a really essential tier of the competitive surfing framework. You've got surfers coming up from the regional qualifying series. You have an international mix on the Challenger Series, and that really vets and matriculates the top talent to the championship tour. It is like plays a crucial role in ensuring the best talent gets to the CT. Snapper Rocks got absorbed into the CT next season, which while that's really good for the CT, it's definitely a blow to the Challenger Series. And all of that being said, like I know a lot of us at the WSL, myself included, are surfers, our regional and commercial partners. We're all working pretty hard to elevate the CS further in 2026 and beyond. I'd love to see more events, a diversity of wave venues to complement the ones we currently have, and really provide like the most quality platform we can for surfers coming out of those regional qualifying series in making a run for qualification at the Elite Championship Tour. And, of all the changes we've done over the last few years, I really think the CS, it's one of the better ones we've made in recent years, and I think it's definitely worthy of investment and effort. But that does require investment into the system, and so we're working hard on that. But it's a solid schedule next year. I think it can be improved on in years ahead, though.
That's awesome. Next question. I'm actually curious to get your thoughts on this one. At Fisher Balfi, at Fisher Balf, Dave, who are your top 5 surfers ever based on ability, style, and competitive success? Oh.
So how much time you got? No, this was, you're very gracious and gave me this one question at least ahead of time for me to think about. And I'm sure some of my answers are going to draw criticism, so that's expected. I think, look, surfing is subjective. And in a way, I think you can argue the sport, it really only evolves based off of like the wrangling of all the collective subjectivities of the world's best surfers, whether that's through surfer advisory councils, like feedback, just judging criteria and performance in the water, in kind of creating a loose framework of objectivity, So it's a tricky situation. And I guess I'm getting kind of like atmospheric for a question about who are your 5 favorite surfers, but I take it seriously. But the following, so these are my personal picks. These are my personal top 5s, and a disclaimer: they won't include, the unimpeachably worthy considerations like Curran or Aki or Lisa, Taj, Joel, Mick, Carissa, Gabriel, Caity, or even Kelly. And none of that's intended to be a snub at them or anyone else. But look, it's subjective. I'm a 41-year-old who lives in Oxnard. I've been on tour for 2 decades, so these are the 5 surfers that I wake up for when I think about surfing. And number 1 is Andy Irons.
Surprise,
to this
surprise.
day, I know, for listeners of the pod, just fell out of their chairs. Look, to this day, I think he's still maybe the best surfer I've ever seen, either in person, on video, webcast, just the ultimate progressive power surfer, drew the most unique lines, one of the best tube riders ever to walk the earth, forehand and backhand style. He took down Kelly at arguably the peak of Kelly's powers. So still my number 1 with a bullet, and probably will be forever. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. Second, Steph Gilmore. 8 world titles, and personally, I think she probably made like the boldest progression in closing the performance gap between men and women over the past 20 years. I've had the good fortune of witnessing pretty much her entire CT career up close while working at the ASP and WSL. And I don't think I can overstate how just light years ahead of her peers she was on tour for years. Obviously, there's been a number of great surfers since. Steph won her first world title. There's been, Carissa and Tyler and Caroline and Caity, but I don't think any of them have had the same performance gap that Steph had, especially for a number of years there. And even to this day, she rips. I was on the Gold Coast in May, and I got to watch her surf in the Legends Heat or whatever they're calling it at the Challenger Series event. And it was against like Kelly and Parko and Mick, and she was the best surfer in the water. And everyone agreed. It wasn't even close. It was no question. She still rips. And so, she's number 2 for me. Number 3 is probably another one people are going to fall out of their chairs for, but Dane Reynolds. Surfing's ultimate reluctant messiah. And I think on this one, it's probably something, it's more profound if you were in a certain place at a certain time and at a certain age for you to appreciate it in full. When I started back at the ASP in 2006, on the CT, you generally had like 2 categories of surfer on tour. On the one side, you had the conservative, competitive tacticians that often had really strong, like power-based approaches, like fundamentals. And then on the other side, you had the reckless, like they'd score 2s or 10s group that would try airs or fin releases. And I think Dane coming along, you know, with like his film First Chapter, and he got CT Wildcards and Marine Layer Productions, then he qualified, and then it turned into Chapter 11. It was truly like one of the most important things that blended those two approaches, where there was still a real power base to his surfing, but then that power and speed was ever present when he'd be pushing it in the progressive arena with like airs and stuff. It wasn't like he switched gears. It was always at full tilt. You know, there was an afternoon at the Quicksilver Pro Gold Coast event in 2010 where Dane drew, at the time, like an on-fire Joel Parkinson in the quarterfinals at Snapper Rocks. And it's one of the best heats I've ever seen. And you have to keep in mind that 2010, Joel was the Australian contender. Mick had won 2 world titles at that point. Joel was always destined to. And he and Dane just went like blow for blow out at Snapper Rocks. It was unbelievable. And Dane ended up winning. And I remember later that day, I ran into Rod Brooks, who's like a Quicksilver company elder god. And he was like an ASP board member. And it was on the streets of Coolangatta. And he had this real like John the Baptist look on his face, and he's like, "Dive, did you feel the world change today?" And I'm like, yes, I did, Rod. and I think a lot's been made about, you know, Dane's style, like out of the water, his discomfort with fame, and, you know, pinballing around the surfing industrial complex and kind of pretty heady times. But all of that was so animated, like at the time. And I think it still is because of how talented and like truly generational a surfer he was and remains. And so, yeah, if I was going to be long-winded about anyone, it's probably going to be Dane on this podcast. But, fourth, John John Florence, controversial, I'm sure. I will be honest, I had Mick Fanning in this spot in an earlier draft, and there's probably plenty I can say about Mick, but John's definitely in the top 5 for me. You know, he obviously won his 3rd world title at Trestles this year, staved off Italo at a wave that I think in a way, I think it meant a lot more for John to win against Italo, surfing the way John did at a wave like Lowers than it would have meant for him at like Fiji or somewhere else where he maybe would have been the heavy venue favorite. Because I think John is kind of about testing himself, and I think that was like a true test of John's sort of comprehensive ability at all parts of surfing. I don't think there's maybe ever been a more well-rounded surfer. He's got it all, like power, barrels, turns, airs, big wave, small wave. Yeah, he's like a one of one. And I think his achievement in a competitive singlet is up there in the rarefied air. And obviously his performance in film parts like A View from a Blue Moon, Done, Space, Maps of Home, etc. It's like, it's truly unparalleled. And he's also like a super nice guy. So 5th and final, Bobby Martinez. I'm a goofy footer. Bobby's always been my favorite goofy footer. He may be the most like technically perfect surfer on the planet. And people have been saying that much longer than I've been saying it. I was like, oh yeah, no, I agree. I just didn't understand it. Now that I'm older, I understand it so much better. I think his approach to waves and the lines he draws, it just doesn't matter if he's on his forehand, backhand, reefs, beach breaks, point breaks, 2 feet, 20 feet. He's always smooth. He's always stylish. He's always critical. And yeah, I'm sure like most people associate him with, the New York event meltdown, which is probably the most viral moment of his career. But I think that does do him a disservice. Like he was truly like the North American prospect when he qualified in the early 2000s. Like he was meant to kind of grab the torch from Kelly, like from a competitive standpoint. It didn't end up happening, but he really changed the way people surf. And I mean, sort of like, faded off into the wilderness a little bit post CT, but anytime you get to see him surf in person or in sort of rare videos, like he's as sharp as ever. Yeah, and I think every goofy footer like just holds him. He's on the Mount Rushmore for goofies. So yeah, that's my 5th. And that's probably a really long answer for that question. But
that's a bit of a masterclass right there. We need to have a little breather for that answer. Give people a chance to like listen back.
If you angrily like DM me,
like, this is wrong. This is
how
terrible.
dare you?
How dare you? Okay. Where are we at now? Oh, okay. Here's a fun one. At I.Ioakim. Why aren't there as many women as there are men on the CT?
Yep, this is a good question. It's not the first time we've got it, but in 2026, we are going to see the women's field move up from 18-person events to 24-person events. And I personally and professionally think that's a step in the right direction. Ultimately, at the CT level, the way we think about the competitive fields for men's and women's really comes down to two major components. And the first component is, are we able to complete the event in a reasonable time frame to maximize the very best conditions on offer? If swell cycles generally operate in 48-hour windows, then at the moment, we need 2 swells to complete the events as they stand today. I am generalizing here, of course, because obviously Mother Nature's in charge. But if we were to increase those fields on the men's and women's side, then we likely may require, 3 or 4 or more swells in an event window to complete a competition. And then we're really putting ourselves in a challenging spot to run heats of consequence in the best ways possible. So that's component one, is like, are the fields in a manageable space in terms of getting the world's best surfers the very best conditions on offer within the event field? The second component in determining field sizes really relates to the global talent pools. A few years back, there was a global survey that indicated that the gender breakdown of surfers worldwide was 9-1, men to women. Now, your mileage, as mine does, may vary when it comes to data like that, but the point at the time was there are considerably more men surfing than women. Now, looking at the championship tour since 2010, the WSL has actually overcorrected the disparity of 9-1 pretty aggressively with 2-1. There was 36 man events and 18 woman events. So I think that's a big positive. However, I also think the investment made into women's surfing over the past decade, both from a wave quality and a pay quality standpoint, has in part contributed to conditions where we've seen a massive leap in terms of performance at the top level. I think that's kind of rippled across the entire surfing community to the point where we're seeing a huge swelling of generational talent on the women's side around the world, and it's at a much higher rate compared to where it was in the decades prior. So this is what, in part, led to the field increase for the women in 2026. And both of these components, both the event run times and kind of the global talent pools that we're seeing, not just inside our system at the Pro Junior, QS, CS, and CT level, but outside, out in the world, those really contribute to the discussions on field size in the future.
That's a good answer. This next one is from @Logan_Bradley_surf. The WSL has ignored the core surfer audience. Has it paid off with other viewers?
Yeah. I think Logan Bradley pops up from time to time. I don't think they like me very much, but I think it's a good question all the same, On the general viewership front, the sports scene, more people tuning in year over year, which is great. I think a lot of people, they work really hard to steward a platform where the world's best surfers get to push the sport. And I'm really happy that those performances of the surfers are resulting in more eyeballs so we can keep doing this. But I think the point about the core surfers is really important. I'm of the opinion that, any business, whatever it is, really lives and dies by the health of its relationship with the core consumer. If you run a climbing gear company and core climbers don't back your product, then whatever gains you make with non-climbers through whatever means you reach them through are probably pretty short-lived. That core climbing community, they're going to have way more influence over those non-climbers than you'll have as a company. So I think that's the case with everything. And fortunately for us, we have really close relationships with the surfers on tour, and they're very involved in the direction of the sport. And I think they're going to be even more involved moving forward through things like the Surfer Advisory Council. It is their platform, and we're lucky that we get to kind of put it there for them to perform on. It doesn't mean that we get everything right. I wouldn't say that we've always gotten everything right. And even when we do, I wouldn't say that we have 100% great track record of communicating that to the core surfing community every time. And, in my opinion, that's something we can do a lot better. And that communication can work both ways, right? Like we can communicate the context and the background and the reasons for why decisions get made in a way that hopefully makes sense for our most passionate community members. And vice versa, they can in turn voice their opinions about those decisions or the state of the sport and just provide ideally good faith insights that we can use to keep improving surfing. I mean, we've all heard it. We've all probably felt it as well, where it's like, why don't you do 10 events in the Mentawis and this and that? That would be awesome. I'm like, hey, yeah, I would like to watch that. Like, it doesn't always work that way. And that's like an extreme example, but there are a lot of things too, where it's like a little bit more information and context goes a long way. And a little bit of good faith, like feedback goes a long way too, where it's like, okay, cool. Like we all want to make this great. None of us are here to make money. Like we're all here to kind of do something that's special. And and I mean, I think, again, I'm glad the viewership's going up year over year, but ensuring that your core fans and that core surfers, if you're in surfing, are backing your product, I think is essential.
Right. Those are great answers, Dave. And I'm sure, I appreciate you taking the time to answer. I'm sure our listeners as well. We're going to take a quick break here to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk about some of our favorite podcast moments and go from there. Answer some more of your listener questions. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. This is the Lineup Podcast. I am your producer, Miguel Clemente, and I'm here with your host, Dave Prodan. I guess for the purposes of this episode, we're kind of switching the roles, but whatever. So this segment, we're going to do the best podcast moments, our favorite podcast moments. So I'll start. Episode 212, I got a chance to meet Mikey Feb.
The amount of times I said to my wife that there's a really good swell coming, like, and then I go on a trip and then, I'm there and I'm like, oh, it wasn't as good as it was meant to be. Like, and she's like, and then every time you're like, hey babe, I think there's a good swell coming or wherever. Like, I think I might go. She's like, oh, I've heard that before, but she's the boy too. But it's just funny because now she's like understands, that part of it too. Like, it's not easy. It's like putting more focus and energy into the other parts of it has helped a lot because it makes it a bit more intentional and easy to, get stuff done. And also just like, I don't know, I find that's like the best part of it, of all the trips that you do, is like, the music and the people that you meet, and just like the sum of all those parts really makes that experience special. So I really enjoy that way of kind of like going to these places and working on things has helped a lot. Yeah.
He is one of my favorite surfers. I'm a big fan of his surfing. And we had Nora Vasconcelos on actually in last year for episode 170. And when we asked her about who her inspirations are in skating, she didn't say some famous surfer. She said, anyone that inspires me to get out there and skate. And I feel that way when I watch Mikey Feb skate. I feel like I'm fanboying here a little bit, but watching his films, after getting to talk to them and seeing how down to earth he was, he invited me after the pod to go to his screening in Santa Barbara at the CI Factory for his new film Spearfish. So I got to meet him in person, which was really cool. But I think that's honestly by far what I love most about working on this podcast. You get to meet the raddest people, you get to learn from them, you get inspired by them, yourself included. I can go down the list. Chris Cote is another one, Chris Malloy that we had, Lauren Spalding, David Wassel. It's just an endless list of guests that have such incredible stories. And me just even getting to sit behind the scenes and listen to them speak. It's just really inspiring. I know this is kind of turning to a bit of a non-answer with all those other names, but I just really appreciate getting to be in the room. So that's my pick.
Fanboying and non-answers, like what's the podcasting world coming to? I think those are good ones, man. It's hard for me to like zero in on moments. I really liked having Jerry Lopez and Peter McCabe on.
Wife,
right?
Going like this, and that was the damnedest shit, let me tell you. And we would just, isn't that right, Gio? We just surf, we just stay there and just, okay, let's go. Boom, off we go. And that's when we were doing the Blue Angels. And I think that was one of the most amazing stuff of our life.
I mean, looking back on my entire career of surfing, I'd have to say that the biggest highlight was those waves that Peter and I rode together. And we called ourselves the Blue Angels. And, we got, I don't know how it started, but we got so good at it that a wave would come and you could see that, we kind of knew that it was a good wave, that he'd look at me or I'd look at him and go, Angels. And we'd take off together, and we were able to ride at full speed and never once got in each other's way, but, go behinds. I mean, I have vivid memories of Peter would be above me. My board would be tucked right under his, but the tube was in between us. He was in the tube and I was just on the other side, that I could have stuck my hand through the curtain and poked him. And we'd go like that, and then, the tube would end and I'd go down, he'd go up, and then we'd do a big go behind. And I mean,
and then he'd be in the same spot. Then he'd be up in the barrel and I'd be standing there looking at him. And then,
but never getting in each other's way at all. Just, I mean, it really was something.
Like, I just got a real kick out of like Jerry being so animated about wanting to book Peter McCabe. It's just like, because awesome. Jerry came on with Pam Levine, earlier in the year, and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And when we were talking about GarageGon, he was like, "Oh, right. you talked to Peter?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know Peter." He's like, "He would be great." And I'm like, he's like, "I'm going to reach out." And I'm like, "Oh, it's just like a nice thing to say, like, in between podcasts or whatever." And then within like a day, he's like, "Peter's ready to go. He and I are going to come on the podcast." And I'm like, that rules. So yeah, it's just, same with you. I mean, there's like, whether they're a CT surfer or a shaper or a musician or a journalist or an elder god like Jerry, like a lot of like respect for all of them. And I try to like temper the fanboy part of it with the like, hey, we're all people and we're all human,
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, that stuff's really cool. Like, and I think the long form discussion format with podcasts is like, okay, cool. It's not, I mean, I'll put it this way, like, for so long when I started, a big part of my job, in those first few years in the mid 2000s were like post-heat interviews. And,
right.
It was literally like, you're getting monosyllabic answers from the world's best surfers because they don't really want to do it. And like, you're kind of just, you're getting a quick soundbite and it's 30 seconds and it's done. And they're all really nice. They're all like really articulate and like insightful people off camera. They were just kind of like, I don't want to do an interview on the broadcast or anything. And so then now with like podcasts, and obviously this isn't unique to the lineup nor unique to surfing, but it's like, there's a lot of time and space for people just to talk and to dimensionalize themselves, which I think's rad.
Yeah, totally. I'll never forget, I think Jerry wanting to get on the pod, all of a sudden I get a call from like Portland, Oregon or something. And I'm just like, hello? Hey, Miguel, it's Jerry. I'm like, whoa. What's up, Jerry?
It's all right.
Yeah.
You should have put him on hold.
Yeah, right. Just, hey, hold on. No, he was great. He was awesome. He like had probably like the nicest camera set up. He was ready to go, but he was so into it. I was like, Jerry, you need some podcast producer credits here for bringing Peter on. So yeah, that was fun. Cool. Well, those are good answers. We'll get into some fan questions. This one is from @TinyDropsOfStillness. Favorite episode of the year or the best advice you got from a guest? That's a good one.
Yeah, well, it's not very PC of me to pick a fave, but similar to what we were just talking about, I will say this, like every time we finish an episode, every time, like I'm pleasantly surprised by the conversation. I learn a ton, and yeah, I just feel pretty fortunate that we get to have these conversations for as long as we do. And yeah, in terms of advice, it's probably recency bias, but yeah, Chris Malloy said something that stuck with me, and he was talking about his father, Mike, and how his father would always encourage him to try to imagine how, the indigenous people would have looked at an area in terms of finding like suitable camp, like water source, wind from a certain direction, stuff like that. And not only did I find that like a really cool, like specific piece of advice, but I also think it one that kind of works at like a metaphorical level too, you know, respect the locals and, you know, like don't be so like arrogant that you can't learn from the past or learn from the people around you. And so, yeah. And again, that might be recency bias because in the last like few episodes, that's what I remember. But yeah, I enjoyed hearing that story.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was a great one. He had another one too where he was talking about like, get your kids interested in nature. Get them out there and they'll turn out okay. Have them fall in love with the mountains, with the water, all that stuff. So great person to learn from for sure. All right, next question is from @Avant Surfwax. Long-time listener, always writing in as well. Thanks. Who is your dream guest in 2025?
Oh man. Well, I'm gonna stall here for you're the producer, Miguel. Who's your dream guest for 2025?
I don't know.
Think about this.
I don't know where this came from, but it's funny because like I was just driving. I wasn't even listening to them, but I was just like, you know, it'd be great to have on the podcast just because I want to have them on is the band Weezer.
Like the whole band or just like Rivers Cuomo?
I think the whole band. I mean, Rivers would be great too, but I was Googling. I was like, do they even surf? I know they have that song Surf Wax America, but I don't think any of them even surf. I was just like, whatever. I want to have them on. So
that's
maybe not for 2025, but hey.
Yeah, you just put yourself on the clock, man.
I know. I probably should have waited.
Go deep on the Pinkerton. I really enjoyed the Matt Costa episode because I just thought he was really interesting and articulate, and he let me like fanboy out about like Isaac Brock and Modest Mouse for like probably longer than I should have because he was very gracious with his time. But I'm like, tell me more stories about Isaac Brock. Okay, dream guest for 2025. Shoot, man. Man. Oh, you know, I would like to talk to Joel Parkinson. I don't know, a dream guest, but like, they're all dream guests. But like,
yeah,
I really enjoyed Joel Parkinson getting to work with him when he was on tour. When I was on tour, he was like a real like human being and like an incredible surfer. And he was maybe the king of like, I'm just gonna give the smallest soundbite I can in my post-heat interview so I can like get back to like living my life. So I'm really admire that in a lot of ways, because then you'd go out and have a beer with him and he would be so articulate and funny and have these amazing stories. So like, yeah, maybe Joel in 25, maybe we can line it up around Snapper Rocks coming back on the CT.
Hey, that's an idea. Putting yourself on the clock now to get Joel on.
I know. Oh, yeah, that's true. I got to find some leverage over him or something.
Who was your favorite when you did these post-heat interviews? Who was some of your favorite people to interview in terms of like getting an answer? I know you just said Joel, but for his like kind of quick one
Right.
answers, but who else kind of stands out?
Well, that's a good question. You know, because my role when I started in media was like, okay, I need to get a soundbite
right
on my audio recorder, which I then upload for the radios to take. They take like, Kelly said this after his round 3 heat at Bells Beach or whatever. And then I would also transcribe it. Like I would just listen to it like 5 times and like type the quote out. And then that would go up in the media center. I did that for years, man. I don't know if that like, maybe that was good, like, you know, cutting your teeth kind of thing. Because it did teach me a lot about how surfers think and how to get quotes out of them. But often what I'd do is I would try not to like, what would happen is there'd be the webcast interview and then there'd be like a TV interview. And then there'd be like another 6 people that wanted their own interview. And I'm like, by the time like, you know, that Aki had done his 8th interview and I'm like, what board are you riding? He's like, I just answered that 8 times kind of thing. Like, and so I would try not to intrude. I would usually just kind of piggyback on the webcast interview if there was a good quote or something. But yeah, I mean, people have said this before, like Kelly is always really interesting once you get him in one place to talk. You know, he's like probably the most difficult person to pin down, but like once he's there, he's very present in like talking to everyone and talking to everyone at length. I don't really have a favorite. Like they're all they're all, I mean, I never had an issue with anybody. They're all kind to me. And even though when I started, my boss would tell me to go get the loser interviews all the time.
Oh no.
So they were always like the grumpiest. And I remember
trying to push you out of the way.
Yeah.
Get
They're
Mike
like,
out of my
I mean,
face.
like in Andy, like when I first started, I had to like chase him down at Trestles one year after he like smashed his surfboard after losing to B Durbridge or something. And I'm like, just some like pipsqueak. And I'm like,
How do you
hey, I'm
feel?
sorry. You have to come back and do an interview. And he was like, looked at me like he wanted to kill me.
For sure.
But no, they're all great. I don't have a favorite from back
Well, how
then.
about this then? Do you have a moment, not to bring up the Bobby moment, but where you were talking to someone and you were like, oh shit. Like,
well, I can, funny enough, like, I was in the restroom when the Bobby thing happened. I was, cause it's kind of like a slow day and it was round one. So it was like non-elimination or whatever. It was like before the swell hit in New York. And
yeah.
I wasn't really doing that too much at the time. I was kind of doing like other media comm stuff. And I remember, you know, you have to eat, you have to use the restroom, you got to take care of yourself during the day. You can be like on call for like 10 hours straight. And I remember like Bobby had won and I just went, oh, okay, well, I'm going to like run into the restroom and I'll come back. And I'm coming back and one of the media people for Quicksilver is like storming through the sand, like in my direction and was like freaking out. Like, she's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, that's unprofessional and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what happened? He says, Bobby just had a meltdown on the broadcast. And I'm like, whoa. And so then I went into my little trailer, which I was sharing with Renato Hickel at the time. He was the tour manager. And I'm like, what did Bobby say? And he's like, what do you mean? Because he didn't have the volume on. He was just like doing his job too. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I just ran into so-and-so and they're really pissed. And he's like, ooh. And so like, he looks at his phone and his phone's lighting up from his bosses being like, you need to find him or whatever the hell they were saying. And I remember he and I marched over to the actual broadcast truck, which was like a quarter mile away and like asked them to like run it back for us on the tape. And we were like, yeah, that's probably a problem. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't really answer your question. That's where I was for that. I mean, people would freak out all the time. It was real Wild West when I started. And there weren't a ton of rules and the fines were like real minimal like at the time. So it's like, I mean, I don't think anyone did this intentionally, but at the time you easily could have probably made like way more money and blown your profile up way more by being controversial or antagonistic. And the fines would have been like $100 or something, you know, like it wasn't anything at the time.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, now this, you know, with the professionalism, everyone taking it super seriously, you just have such incredible performances on tour. It's like insane.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think when I started, it was like all of us, you know, surfers included, it wasn't really like an avenue to have like a, you know, how do I put this? Fiduciarily prosperous career, right? Like we're all kind of running away to join the circus in a way, surfers included. And so there, I don't want to kind of like lionize it or romanticize it, but there was, I'd say, more personalities and more emotions, which is funny because like the money wasn't there, you know? So like it's, I don't know, the reason they did it was to kind of propel the dream where it was like, no, I have to get through this heat and I hate that fucking person because I don't want to go back to civilian life. You know, like I want to keep doing this.
They're just doing it to do it type of thing.
Kinda. And in a way, like it's pretty significant elevation in prize money and sponsorship contracts and mainstream press and attention, you know, relative to 20 years ago. And you would think that would heighten the stakes, but it's kind of like homogenized the tempers a little bit where people are like, well, I don't want to go too out of bounds because I need to focus. There's too much at stake, which is, you know, it's a weird way to
Catch-22 type of thing, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, I guess that's why even for Caity, it's kind of refreshing to have a personality like her on tour. It's not like the most controversial one, but it's kind of like that. I don't know. I mean, she deferred her first year and it was kind of like, whoa.
Yep.
Like, who does that? Like, you don't care about like, and then she comes back and she rips it, makes Final Five. And then the next year she comes back and she wins.
Yeah. I think there's like, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but like because the sport happens in the most dynamic field of play on earth, right? With the ocean, where like every wave is different, every venue is different. I think it lowers the ceiling on confidence with the athletes, right? Because you could take an NBA player, an NFL player, and they could be like, I'm the biggest, fastest, strongest, most talented. I work the hardest.
Totally.
They enter their competitive arena with like a level of swagger because they're like, I'm the very best.
They own it everywhere they go. It doesn't matter where I am. Yeah.
You can take that same like level of like advantage in a surfer.
Yeah.
And like the swagger is down on the floor because they're like, yeah, pipe might decide that's not my day. Kind of thing, you know? It's like, so it is really interesting. And I think when we talk about this forever, I guess. But like I think when we notice personalities shine through, it's almost because they're just they're not thinking of anything else. They're just like it's less to do with like performance and swagger and more about like, I know who I am and I know how I surf and I know I can do this kind of thing. And I don't worry about what people are saying about me online, or, you know, I don't worry about a social media profile or whatever. I'm just going to be myself, which ironically enough often like works way better in social media.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. No, that's a great answer. Cool. I could ask you a million questions and go down the rabbit hole here, but
yeah, you're the host, man. I'm just the guest.
Let's wrap this segment up here with one more question from @MatsonColbert. Actually, kind of similar to the last one. Dave, who is your ultimate dream guest you have yet to get on the podcast? I should have saved Weezer for this one. Then I'm not in such a
man. Who are you going to say now? I'm going to ask you. Like, ultimate dream guest.
No.
Like, it's really putting like a lot of pressure on whoever I name. I don't want people to read into it too much. Like, I mean, I mean, surfing wise, I guess, you know, I think for me, like, I wanted to be like originally like a surf journalist in a way. Like I wrote, you know, I started writing at Surfing Magazine with Evan Slater before I worked for the ASP, and always read the magazines, like, and especially since, you know, my mom's Australian. So I would go over there a lot and had family over there and connections, and really got into like the Australian magazines like Tracks and Waves and Surfing World, Australia Surfing Life and stuff like that. And so one of my, you know, favorite journalists that I ever read and who I ended up, you know, becoming friends with was Sean Doherty. And I think to this day, he's like the best surfing, you know, journalist out there. He's written a few books, but even just his insights in sort of like round 3 contest coverage I always thought were really smart and then kind of poetic and had all these cool references. So yeah, I think he hasn't like followed the tour in a while, but like I'd like to talk to him just about surfing in general, you know. Like I think
it's cool
when I get to talk to kind of like a Nick Carroll or a Jake Howard or a Jamie Brisick or you know, journalists and editors and storytellers. They always have like good things to say. And I think for someone like Sean, who did travel on tour for so long and who was in a lot of these places and rooms where important things were happening, you know, in the shaping world or in the industry world or in the performance world, like I just think he'd have so many stories, and I could probably talk to him for, you know, 20 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. You'd have some of the stories that like no one, I mean, some were documented and some just weren't. So they would have those stories just in their memory. And
I mean, even like, you know, it is really like this concept years ago where it was like, you know, fringe deities really, in a way where it's like, you know, within the niche world of surfing, like, you know, people like Joel and Kelly and Steph, they're like gods, you know, but like, it's only in that world, really. Like, it's like the second they leave that world, everyone levels out. And it's like, all these like amazing moments in history, and with all the magazines going away in a lot of ways, it's like, they just don't exist anywhere. Like even that Dane Reynolds, Joel Parkinson heat, like there's like a 39-second clip on YouTube or something. But it's like, might have been one of the most important moments in surfing history, you know? And it just is like, it's just like vapor. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get sad. But anyway, what's so bigger than Weezer, producer Miguel, who is your ultimate dream guest to have on the podcast?
Oh, God. I'm going to flip it a little bit because I was thinking about it. I was literally going through like a million names. You could have anyone. It's ultimate. But I just finished reading, actually been a few months ago, but it was Eddie Would Go by Stuart Holmes Coleman. And I read Eddie's story and you know, Eddie's doing his opening ceremony, so it's a bit more top of mind. But I remember listening to his like last radio interview. I think they have it on YouTube somewhere where he like sings the song about the Hokulea. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, that'd be rad if we could have Eddie on the podcast, just kind of like a fantasy dream guest. Have him sing a song, just bring the vibes up. I'd be like, that'd be so sick. So that's my answer.
It's a good one. I think mine might be easier to book, though.
Yeah, I think so. In another life, we'll have Eddie. Cool. Well, thanks for that question. For those that we've answered from in this segment, we'll get into a couple more topics here in the next segment. But let's take another quick break from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Lineup Podcast, everybody. For this final segment, I think it'd be great to do a look ahead kind of thing. We've just released the 2025 CT schedule. So we've got Bonsai Pipeline, Surf Abu Dhabi, Peniche, Punta Roca, Bells Beach, Snapper Rocks, Margaret River, Lower Trestles, Saquarema, Jeffreys Bay, Teahupo'o, and WSL Finals, this time at Cloudbreak in Fiji. So Dave, let's get some of your thoughts. What event are you looking forward to most?
Yeah, like I think I said it earlier, like a lot of people work really hard to put these things together. And, you know, I think if you look at the balance of venues on tour in 2025, it's maybe the best schedule that's ever been put out there. You know, you have really, really major venues. You got interesting diversity. You know, I think for me personally, like seeing the CT surfers back at Snapper Rocks, in May, in Magic May, it used to be at the start of the season. So it'd be kind of like late February, early March, which is a different kind of swell cycle. But I was there this last May and it's a really beautiful time in that part of the world. The sand was great. Swell was great. The conditions are great. So it'd be cool to see them back there. You know, even Lower Trestles, like moving from a finals venue to a CT venue, it's just more surfers surfing it. It's going to have kind of a different vibe to it. There will still be like stakes, but they won't be a one-day world title stakes. They'll be post-cut, like everyone's kind of campaigning towards getting a final spot in Cloudbreak. And so I just look forward to seeing like the world's best take lowers in kind of a different atmosphere, if you will. And then, yeah, for sure, like Pipe, you know, it's coming in just a few weeks. It's exciting. You know, Tahiti, J-Bay's coming back, finals in Fiji. It's all pretty good. Like I don't really have a favorite, but I guess the ones I highlighted are the ones I'm most interested in.
I wanted to get your thoughts on, I'm just looking at like some of the rookies on tour now. So we got Bella Kenworthy, George Pitar, Jackson Bunch, Aaron Brooks, Joel Vaughn, Marco Mignot, Vahine Fierro, Edgar Grosjean. And I'm wondering, like, how do you think they're going to shake up the tour coming into Pipe? Do you think that it's starting off at Pipe? I don't know what their experiences are. I know some of them are probably at Pipe there, but being in, you know, now in the CT with the best of the best surfers in the world, their first year, how do you think they're going to fare? And it just being so back to back, like, yeah, how do you think they're going to fare in the CT this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it can be good and bad. I think, like, generally, and this is something that comes up every so often on the podcast, is I don't think anyone anywhere in the world appreciates the level jump from really anything like, you know, top rated CS surfer to the CT. Every surfer on the CT, like the speed and the power, the approach, the rhythm they have with the ocean is night and day, even to kind of the very best surfers that get, you know, hyped in videos or hyped in magazines and hyped on tour, on matriculation tours, et cetera. It's like the CT is a completely different animal. That said, I think the updates to the schedule this year, there's the potential for it to benefit the rookies, right? Because I think in the past you had, all right, you're a rookie, you're now at Pipeline, CT1, you know, it's just like, right. And then you go to Sunset Beach, which is another like heavy water Hawaiian spot. Even the best surfers at Sunset Beach are like, it's a roulette table out there. Like it's a big playing field. It's really difficult, right? And then we would go to Peniche, which is, beach break. You go to Bells Beach and Margaret River. And those were your opportunities, right? As a rookie. Now, you get Surf Abu Dhabi, a CT2 after pipe, right? So there's a performance aspect to that. We've added Punta Roca, which is more of a performance-y kind of point break. that splits up Peniche and Bells Beach. And then we've added Snapper Rocks, which is maybe, outside of lowers, the most high performance, like, small to mid wave, high performance kind of surfing approached wave on tour, right? And so it's a lot more diverse. And I think with those younger surfers and the rookies, they are used to grinding, so the back-to-back nature of these things, it might benefit them in a way where they're like, oh no, I'm used to this, as opposed to like a CT surfer who's maybe done it for a bunch of years, is a little bit like, oh, why do I have to do this? Like flying here, flying there. And I'm speculating at this point, but yeah, I think it's pretty balanced in terms of advantage. Like, absolutely. Like if you've got experience at Pipeline, if you've got experience in these wave pools, whether it's Surf Abu Dhabi or Lemoore, if you've got experience at Bells Beach and Margaret River, you're going to have a huge advantage. But I think that the surfers you name, the rookies, there's some really interesting ones. We've seen Aaron Brooks and Vahine Fierro are 2 out of the 3 rookies coming on the women's side. They've both won CT events. Right? Like, George Pitar, I think he made the semifinals in Margaret River last year. So there's good surfers coming on board.
What would you say, with all your experience seeing competitors come in and out of the tour over the past 20 years, if you were a rookie or if you were talking to a rookie, what would be, I guess, like the best advice that you would probably give them in order for what to expect? And I know that they've, like you said, Vahine, Aaron Brooks and George, they've kind of competed at this highest level as well, where there's wild cards, some of them have won events, so they kind of know. But to be on the tour, to have your number on your jersey, and fighting now for a world title, not just like, oh, I'm here for this event, I'm just trying to win. What's some advice that you can give them?
Yeah, I'm not the one to ask, that's for sure. I'm just sort of like an observer. But what I have observed is that surfers that seek out and ask for help at these venues, you see amazing things happen. Adriano de Souza, when he was in the title hunt in 2015, he was very, very good at a lot of things. I think the criticism on him at the time was like, can he do it in tubes? Can he do it at places like Tahiti at Pipeline? He reached out to Jamie O'Brien, who, if you look at those two on paper, are probably strange bedfellows. And he went and learned from Jamie, and the forecast wasn't great for pipe that year, but he ended up winning the world title. He ended up winning Pipeline. And you've seen it in other places too. Like Italo reached out to Shane Dorian at Pipeline. Like Ethan Ewing works with Mick Fanning through the DHD connection. If you got access to that kind of talent and that kind of insight as a rookie, you should do it. And you should pay for it if you can afford it, because I think that's probably the biggest thing. You can turn up early, you can surf the wave all you want, but getting patched into the rhythm of these places with, masters of these venues or masters of the tour, it's going to go a long way. And even the coaches we have on tour, like, your Luke Egans and your Glenn Halls and your Richard Dog Marshes and your Tom Whitakers, like there is a reason that surfers seek them out to work with them. It's because they have been around the traps and they know the ins and outs of these places. They know the conditions, they know the equipment you need, they know how to get you into a rhythm. And I think the coaches are probably, it might sound like obvious, but like that would be the recommendation, is like seek people out and get guidance. Yeah.
And with, with this new class And I may, well, actually, let's go back. So I think with what you said, right, that seek people out, get guidance. There's people on tour that know better and can teach you ways if you're lacking in some areas. And as you said before, where like you could be really great at this one spot, you'll show up to this other spot, and you have no idea what's going on, no idea what you're doing. Humility is key, I imagine, at doing well here. And so I guess I wonder then, now looking at the CT, who do you think is, I guess, in trouble? Like, who could be in trouble with this new class coming back? I think, well, Sally Fitz is coming back as well. Like, he's going to be a wild card coming into 2025. Like, I imagine Kelly will probably be coming back at some point or another as a wild card. And who do you think on the CT now has, may need some, I don't know, who do you think could be in trouble there?
From like the surfers, the non-rookies?
From the non-rookies, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple things that happen, right? It's not just like every 5 years or every 10 years or every 15 years, like there's a performance shift amongst generations. But there's also just like, if someone's been on tour for 10 years, that's quite a long time, So I think there's like a hunger and a motivation thing. Something that I see quite a lot is both the runner-up to the world title, but then also the rookies who performed well in their original year. Sometimes you see them get knocked back or like a regression to the mean. I think they're two separate cases, but with the runner-ups, like so much would go into the campaign and they get so close and they miss out, and for whatever reason they miss out, right? And they go, oh man, I'm so bummed, and they get knocked back psychologically. And you see that throughout the years across the rankings. And then same with rookies that perform really well. They come in and they have success. And I'm not saying their approach changes, but maybe their expectation management change, where they're like, oh, I was a rookie and I did this well. I should do this well next year. And it's like, that might not be the case. And you start to see like a couple of bad results, and sometimes it's not the case just because it's the ocean, right? Yeah. And a couple of bad results start to snowball, and they start to doubt themselves, and they get into a real rut. So like, I don't know. It's too hard to name names, and it's like, but throughout history, whether it was us starting at Snapper Rocks or us starting at Pipe, the performances at the opening event of the year, good, bad, and ugly, have like an outsized impact on the tone of those surfer seasons in a lot of ways. It really sets their trajectory in a way more often than not. So I think Pipe, in addition to being the most revered wave on the planet, it has that extra reason to watch, because I think it does set the tone for surfers throughout the season.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And there's just such a variety of waves on tour. It's going to happen quick. And I guess we'll see how they do. But okay, so overall, what are you looking forward to then in 2025 in general? Kind of last question for me.
Good question. Well, I mean, I think you start at the top, right? Like Caity Simmers, she's the reigning world champion. She's had like a meteoric rise up, through the rankings to get to the very top of the surfing pyramid. And yeah, I mean, that Andy Irons comment about everyone wants you to win your first world title, and then as soon as you do, you become the target. It'll TBD. Like, maybe she just keeps getting better, and maybe the weight of that crown it's not heavy for her, and she just keeps getting better and better. Or maybe she's like, well, now I'm in the spotlight, now I'm expected to perform, and now I'm the hunted, So I'm definitely curious about that. I'm definitely curious about surfers like Steph and Lakey, who are world title contenders and world champions in their own right, coming back after some time off. How are they going to mix in with the current crop of CT surfers? And then, obviously, like, those young surfers like Bella, Aaron, and Vahine, like, how are they going to handle it? Like, as we said, Aaron and Vahine, they might be rookies. They've already won a CT, which most CT surfers do not do.
Yeah.
So really curious about that. And then
totally
on the men's side, we talked about it. John, he's got his 3 title dynasty. He has been on tour. He qualified at the mid-year rotation in 2011. So way over 10 years at this point, right? He's been injured. He's come back from injury. He's won all these CTs. He's blown everyone's minds in terms of performance. He's a new father. Right. I mean, frankly, be interesting to see if he decides to do the tour in a way. Maybe he needs some time off, or maybe he's done, or maybe he's like, no, I'm fine. Let's keep going. So I think that's the big question. And then the other world champs on tour, you have Italo Ferreira, you've got Gabriel Medina. Where are they going to be? You know, how are they looking at not only the calendar, but looking at a venue like finals in Fiji as goofy footers and saying, this is my year, right? Yeah. So yeah, like I'm really curious about that. And I mean, you have all these surfers on tour. You can throw a dart at the men's rankings. You got Kanoa, you've got Leo, you've got Felipe is another world champ coming back. I almost forgot him, you know, but like you've got all these surfers, you've got Griffin, you've got Ethan, you've got Jack. And it's like, not only are these surfers on tour, but they are surfers who growing up were probably told by everyone in their ecosystem that they were for sure going to be the world champ.
Yeah.
And a lot of them haven't got it yet.
Yeah.
So it's like, which popcorn kernel is going to pop this year? I'm curious.
And when you're looking at the tour too, I imagine it's hard as a surfer to be like, I'm going to take this one off. I'm going to wait this out this year.
You never know what'll happen, right? And then, so, yeah, I mean, I think the ones that haven't won yet will come in even hungrier, and the ones that have are, I mean, Gabe's another one. Like, he and John came on tour at the same time. The mid-year rotation in 2011, and he's got nothing else to prove, but maybe he does to himself. Like, at some point, I think it elite athletes, like, you probably start with, I've got all these things to prove to people outside.
Yeah.
And once you do it, you go, well, the only person I've got things left to prove to is myself, you know? And that's the reason I stay on tour. That's the reason I still play in the NBA or whatever it is. What's the saying? Like, once you slay all the dragons, the last one's inside you. So it's like, if you're good with that, then you're probably good to take time off. But maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, no, I've got things to push. I actually think, and I don't want to play armchair psychologist here, but like, I really do think that like that last dragon for John was winning lowers, winning the world title in the finals format.
Yeah.
I really think that talking to him over the years, that's something he wondered about himself. And he didn't have to prove that to anybody else, obviously. But like, and you know, maybe he'd be like, well, I don't agree with this, but like, I think he wanted to prove that to himself. So.
Well, it's funny because he said, like, when he was on the pod, that he was not even sure if he was going to do the tour this year.
Sure.
And coming in, and you know, he's again second at pipe, and I mean, he's doing well. He's making finals and all this stuff, but he's just coming shy of that win at certain events. And I think he won in El Salvador this year, which is great. But I think that was after the second in Tahiti, where I'm sure he wanted that, and it was all time and firing, and so I think I agree. Like, him winning the championship this past year was probably one where he's like, oh, I can do it in finals. In my first finals appearance, I made it happen. I think the one thing that I'll add that he might have some fire for is maybe an Olympic gold. But we'll see.
Maybe.
Okay, actually, I did have one last question, because you were talking about, you know, expectations and, you know, seeing if you can make it through. The cut was moved to after number 7. I guess talk a little bit about that, the decision behind that, moving it past 7. I'm sure there's material out there somewhere, but just want to get it directly from the source. And what do you think, or how do you think that's going to affect the surfers on tour this year?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's 100% the right decision. I think the mid-season cut, it introduced like a real dynamic element into the middle of the season. But I think after the last few years, and certainly speaking to the surfers, it's so quick, you know, at that 50% marker, where it's like you have a couple of bad heats and things bounce the wrong way, and you're really on the back foot.
Done.
So I think extending it out, so it's going to be at event 7 in 2025 out of 11. I like seeing it between that 66% and 75% point in the season, because if you have that diversity of wave venues beforehand, the world's best surfers have plenty of opportunity to prove their case for whether they deserve to stay on tour or not by that point. And so, yeah, absolutely the right thing to do to shift it back. And I'd imagine it stays somewhere in that range moving forward. And what that also does is it creates these survival stakes throughout a longer portion of the season instead of 5 events, trying to identify not only who's performing well, who's winning CTs, but who's going to survive the cut. You extend that out to CT7, so it's a little bit longer, and then you create this real 4-event sprint towards the WSL finals, which, if you're taking a look at the schedule, right, at the end of the year, that post-cut schedule is pretty impressive, right? So you have CT7, it's Margaret River, and then you've got Lower Trestles, Saquarema, J-Bay, and Tahiti, like 4 really diverse venues in 4 different regions that are going to test that sharpened field of men's and women's surfers and decide who the final 5 are. So, yeah, I mean, that was the thinking that went into it. I'm really happy we got it done. And I think it is going to have a considerable impact on tour. It's hard to say though, right? It's hard to say if it's going to benefit the rookies or benefit the veterans because, as we said before, like there's different versions of events that can happen where things might swing one way or the other. I think what this provides though is more opportunity to recover, whether you're a veteran who just had some bad breaks at the start of the season, or you're a rookie who didn't quite find their feet early enough. You've got more time to recover and restabilize your campaign to stay on tour.
Yeah. Those are great points, and thanks for answering those questions. Thanks for letting me pick your brain here a little bit.
No worries.
Yeah. We got a couple more questions from the fans. I think let's wrap those up and ask a few of those. And then we'll get out of here. So first question is from @Zach.Doran. Where do you see the CT in 10 years? Ooh.
10 years.
10 years. Where do I see myself in 10 years?
The rest of this year,
Yeah, what's happening?
So 2034. If I had to guess, you probably have equal numbers on the men's and women's sides at that point, I'd imagine, just looking at those talent pools emerging across the world. And on that point too, I think if you look at where the talent's coming from internationally, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw greater national diversity on the CT. More surfers from Mexico, from Central America, from Asia, from Indonesia, from other places that have quality waves, that have amazing athletes and surfers that are really elevating to that elite level and contending for world titles. That said, in surfing, I think while things are always evolving, there are some things that just remain eternal. I think the North Shore will still be the proving grounds. I think pipe will still have an essential role in determining the world's best surfers. J-Bay will still be J-Bay. Teahopu will still be Teahopu. But yeah, and I hope, those communities, I hope they're supported and protected. And I think, I hope that these almost mystical resources they have in these really special waves are given the respect and stewardship they deserve.
Yeah. @Zach.Dorian. Can you do that? He asked 2 questions.
2 questions. He snuck in.
Yeah, snuck in. Can the Triple Crown be brought back as the last 3 events on the Challenger Series?
Oh, okay. That's a timely question, I think.
Yeah.
It can be, I think. Maybe not all of them is Challenger Series. Maybe, a combination of Challenger and QS. I think before it was a combination of QS and CT. But yeah, I think we talked about it before, the WSL as a company, it has this like awesome responsibility in stewarding a platform for the world's best surfing. It is, however, it's a platform that's contingent on both support and investment from, the communities, regional media, and commercial partners. So, with a place like the North Shore and specifically venues like Haleiwa, Sunset, and Pipeline, I'd imagine that if the support and investment for those events to happen existed, they would return to the calendar very quickly. And I want to be clear, like support and investment that strikes the right balance with the North Shore community and provides fair opportunities for the local surfers to showcase their talents alongside international surfers in their home waves. I think that's the way it has to be around the world, but absolutely in the North Shore as well.
Yeah, I love that. At hello, I am Joe, or maybe at hello, I am Joey, says or asks, Dave, what's the most memorable wave you've caught?
I've heard other people talk about this, which makes me feel a little bit better because I have a real hard time remembering any wave. Like almost like
what?
Well,
you surfed for way longer than I have.
No, but it's not like I've always so I think for me, and I'll go back to playing armchair psychologist. I think it's such a and not to get too highfalutin, but like surfing is such a meditation for me in that when I do it, I'm doing my best not to think about anything else. Like it's probably the most present I am, which is probably a problem. I got to work on that in other parts of my life, but I think I'm so present doing it that I'm not like my brain isn't recording what's actually happening. Like I will remember pieces of a wave, but like as soon as I get back to the shore, I'm like, I don't remember. I remember I either had fun or kind of thing.
Right,
I'm like, there's a version of events in my head where I'm like, I had a good session, and then I'm trying to remember everything. And by the time I drive away, I don't remember shit. But I will say, the most memorable wave I've ever caught was one of the first ones I ever caught at San Clemente Pier when I was like 12 or 13. And it was the first wave I can remember being on the face of a wave. I didn't come from a coastal town. I came from kind of inland Orange County. We would take the OC Transit Authority to the beach, and it would take 45 minutes for us to get San Clemente Pier. And, we would binge watch What's Really Going Wrong from Lost Enterprises, where it wasn't appropriate for 12 and 13-year-olds. But the thing that we gravitated towards were chop hops are cool.
Yeah.
And you don't actually have to be on the face to do that. And point of fact, you're probably better just going straight and trying to do that. And we thought that was surfing, We're like, what's with all the bottom turn and cutback stuff? We want to do what Corey and Chris are doing. And so that was really a waste of time for my first year of surfing probably. But I remember very vividly, it was a summer afternoon. It's a rare good sandbar built up off the pier. It was actually kind of crowded, but I just was 12 or 13. And I remember catching a wave and setting my inside rail just enough and standing there and it's had been active. My brain got activated for the first time as a surfer where I'm this is completely different to what I've been trying to do for a year or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the most memorable wave. And it's not even close. I have nothing, there's nothing
That's
behind
so
that
funny.
one for me. But that was a profound experience for sure.
Yeah, I feel I probably just catch so few waves that when I do catch one, I'm I know everything about this. I just remember it's the only wave I got. Oh god.
Yeah, I don't know. It must exist somewhere because I'm able to process and be okay, put your hand in that position next time or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are improvements being made, so there has to be some sort of repository for information. But
somewhere.
Yeah, maybe it's better that way. So I don't worry about it otherwise. Yeah.
That's true. And some people say that you'll never forget your first. I mean, I remember definitely my first. I'm sure you do, for years as well. So
sure, yeah.
Cool. Next question. At Veronica Miller 23456, if you could surf anywhere in the world tomorrow just for one day, where would you go?
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh. Well, it's pretty cold here at the moment, so somewhere warm.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back to Garagegon. I thought
Nice.
that place was awesome. And so far away that kind of the whole being present thing's made very easy.
Totally.
The walk out over the reef and then the paddle out, and there's just you're so far away from everything
Where else are you gonna go?
Cool. Yeah, that's right. You're
What else you got to think about?
well, nothing else to think about. And just avoid the monkeys on the way back to the tent and you're good to go.
Would you take Jerry and Peter with you?
Yeah. Why? Hey, if there's no rules, take them all. No worries.
Jerry,
Yeah.
Peter, if you're listening.
I mean, I have a feeling that the way things are working out, I have to ask them to take me. But yeah, sure, yeah, that sounds good.
So we got Joel in May, Peter and Jerry for your wave. We got to get Weezer. We're shaping up for a heavy.
Where are
year
we
in
taking
2025.
Weezer? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
gotta take Weezer too. All right. At TC13 asks, will AI be able to take some of the subjectivity out of judging, measure speed, wave size?
It's a good question. Maybe I don't have an answer there. I think like it is important. Like I think this goes back to one of the communication things. Like, probably in any sport, like no one's wearing like a referee's hat. The judges are always copping all sorts of hell, regardless of the sport, and that's no different in surfing. But I will say that the judges do deserve a lot of credit, especially in my time here, because the way that they've interpreted the criteria over the last 20 years and the way that they've officiated has shifted the performances of the world's best surfers in competition. And by that, I mean, when I started, you had the world's best surfers on the CT. You can make an argument they did not surf their very best in competition. They would surf conservatively. They'd surf at 70% because that was surfing to the criteria. And then you'd see amazing shit happening outside of a singlet. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen today, but that's almost been inverted because of a lot of reasons, like all the stakes that go into competition now, the money associated with it, like the level of performance, and like barrier breaking surfers over the last few years that are now surfing to a criteria where the judges are encouraging them to surf their very best. And so what you see in 2024 is almost the inverse. You have the world's best surfers surfing their very, very best in competition because that's where it matters most for them, and then surfing at like 70% in free surfs often because they don't want to get hurt. So that's my little rant on the judging, but also like, talking about measuring speed and wave size, like those things are important, but they don't go into like it like, I almost think that you can get too computational and too like narrow-minded in a lot of these elements of surfing to think like, well, the fastest surfer should win. It's like, just because you're going the fastest doesn't mean you're surfing the best, right? And it's like, well, the biggest wave should win. It's like the biggest wave is often not the best wave, kind of thing. So it's all these elements factor in. And I mean, maybe there's an AI that'll be able to take all those and process the subjectivity of world-class surfing and take all these factors in and create something that's a little bit more standardized. But I have to give a lot of props to the judging panel over the last few years because, like the surfing we're seeing in live arena it's never been better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would not want to take that job on. That seems so hard, especially when you're seeing so many great waves. How do you score? How do you even score the first one? Sometimes, like, yeah, they do a hard job and they're great at it. So, okay, last question here from @Al_Dawson_. What's on for Christmas and New Year's Eve?
I mean, just try to get through the week. Yeah, just spend time with my kids, like get some cold waves and read some books, get kind of organized for 2025. I think it's going to be a big year, but yeah, no, nice. I mean, that's the nice thing, I think, too, like it's going away to like running away to join the circus is like, you travel for so long that like when a holiday comes around, you're kind of like, I don't want to go anywhere. Like I just want to like stay in one place so much. So, and I don't travel as much as I used to for work, but like, yeah, I like where I live. I love hanging out with my kids and
totally,
we've had a good season for waves so far. So hopefully it keeps going and yeah, a little bit of downtime. What about you, Miguel?
Megan and I, we're actually going to go to Maui in a couple of days. Not necessarily for Christmas, but I say it all the time. We just got married, so we got some credit card points from how expensive that one was. That we're going to take some days out in Maui. So we'll go there. We'll be back. We'll hang with her family, then my family. And then when we come back here to home, we'll just kind of hunker down and hang out until the new year. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. If we didn't get to them, please feel free to DM us. We love talking to you guys. We love hearing from you guys. And I think we might have actually answered all the ones that we got, but maybe not. And if you didn't even get a chance to submit a question, feel free to DM us. We'll have more of these, I'm sure, in the future. But until then, that's a wrap for 2024. Thank you to everyone who submitted those questions. Thank you to everyone who listens, our fans. Thank you, Dave, for being such a gracious host to all our guests, to our fans, to myself. And looking forward to an amazing 2025.
Thanks, Miguel. And thanks to all the listeners. Hope you guys have a good end of year, early new year time. Hope you're getting waves wherever you're at. And talk to you soon.
Happy holidays, everyone.